The winter coat was still hanging by the front door. Charcoal wool, expensive, a gift from my mother-in-law, Eleanor, who bought it because she said my old denim jacket made me look like hired help when we went out for dinner. Those were her exact words. I was standing by the massive quartz island in the kitchen of our newly renovated colonial house in Boston, holding a cold mug of coffee, watching my husband, Julian, tilt his phone away from me as he typed. He didn't think I noticed. But as a professional landscape architect who designs multi-million-dollar public parks for the city, my entire life is built on observing spatial relationships, sightlines, and shifts in the environment. I notice everything. Beside Julian sat his younger cousin, Clara. She was 22, fresh out of a suburban college, and had been crashing on our guest bed for 6 months under the guise of finding her footing. She was wearing a cashmere sweater Julian had bought her for Christmas. All afternoon during our family's Sunday brunch, Clara had been moving smoothly between our high-profile guests, laughing at my father-in-law's stale jokes, while I was introduced simply as Julian's wife who does some gardening for the city. Eleanor wasn't whispering when she walked into the kitchen, carrying an empty wine glass. She looked at the expansive, custom-built French doors I had spent 3 months drafting and budgeting for. Then she looked at Clara, and finally at Julian. "It's such a shame, Julian," Eleanor said, her voice carrying over the soft jazz music playing in the living room. "If you had married someone with real corporate ambition, like Clara's mother's side, you'd be a partner at the firm by now. Instead, we're just waiting." Julian didn't look up from his phone. He just nodded softly and murmured, "I know, Mom." Clara smiled into her champagne glass. The charcoal coat stayed hanging by the door. Welcome to calm revenge tales where quiet people get loud justice and the patient ones always win. If you're new here, subscribe. You'll want to be here for what comes next. My name is Evelyn Vance. Before I turned 31, I had successfully managed 3 major urban drainage and green space contracts across the state of Massachusetts. I did it while paying off my own Ivy League student loans, keeping my own private studio apartment downtown as an office, and for the last 3 years, quietly funding my younger brother Leo's tuition at the Rhode Island School of Design, without a single person in the Vance family knowing. Leo was the kind of gentle soul our family didn't know what to do with. He didn't talk about stocks or tech startups. He just painted. He kept a worn canvas roll under his bed filled with stunning, hyper-detailed architectural watercolors of abandoned industrial buildings. He had shown them to me once, saying quietly, "I just want to capture the spaces people leave behind." 3 weeks after that Sunday brunch, Julian sat me down. The air in the living room felt thin. He told me that his mother's investment firm was backing a new real estate venture, and they needed our Boston home as collateral to secure the prime commercial loan. Not only that, Eleanor had suggested Clara take over the interior styling of the project, a role I had spent a year preparing for. "It's just business, Evie," Julian said, his voice flat, completely devoid of the warmth he used to have when we first met in college. "Mom thinks you're too comfortable with your city job. Clara has that fresh, aggressive edge we need. And besides, if the house is in my name, it's my risk to take." I looked at him. I looked at the kitchen island I had picked out, the light fixtures I had wired myself, and the walls I had painted. I didn't scream. I didn't break a glass. I just felt a cold mathematical calculation click into place right beneath my ribs. "Okay," I said quietly. Julian blinked, visibly relieved but slightly unsettled by how easily I had surrendered. "You're okay with it? No fight?" "No fight," I replied, setting my mug down on the quartz counter. "If your mother thinks that's the path to your success, go ahead." What Julian and Eleanor didn't know was that a landscape architect doesn't just look at the trees. We look at the foundation, the water table, and the legal easements of the land. And exactly 48 hours prior, I had received a certified letter in my private studio office that changed the entire topography of our lives. The cold morning light in Boston always hits the bricks first. The certified letter on my studio desk was from a law firm in downtown Chicago called Sterling and Croft. It turned out that my maternal grandfather, a stubborn, quiet, structural welder named Arthur Vance, had passed away. My family had alienated him years ago because he refused to invest in my father-in-law's failed tech funds. He had lived out his days in a modest brick house by the lake, invisible and completely unbothered by the high society drama of the Vance family. Arthur Vance had died with zero debt and a massive, untouched portfolio of industrial land bonds. The total value of his estate was $2.4 million. And according to the strict terms of his will, drafted 6 years ago, the entire estate was left to me on one specific condition. The clause read, "To my granddaughter, Evelyn Vance, who understands that a structure is only as good as its foundation. This estate shall be released to her sole custody on her 31st birthday, provided she holds an active professional license and maintains a primary residence completely independent of any marital property owned or co-signed by Julian Vance." My 31st birthday had been the exact Tuesday before Julian asked me to sign over our house as collateral. The clause was already active. I didn't call Julian. I didn't text Eleanor. Instead, I spent the next 2 weeks working late at my downtown studio. To Julian, I was just handling minor city drainage issues. In reality, I was meeting with a forensic accountant and a top-tier divorce attorney. We meticulously mapped out every single asset, every contract I had brought into the marriage, and the exact legal boundary of our Boston home. Because Julian's mother had insisted on keeping the house strictly in his name to protect his family legacy, the house was legally his liability. When I signed the waiver allowing him to use the property as collateral for his mother's high-risk venture, I also quietly removed my name from the joint bank account, transferring my personal savings into a new private trust under my grandfather's estate. By the first week of May, Julian's real estate venture officially launched. He and Clara were in charge. They had taken the loan, backed by the house, and poured everything into a luxury condo development project on the waterfront. That Saturday, Eleanor hosted a celebratory dinner at a high-end French restaurant in Beacon Hill. Clara was glowing, talking about the bohemian minimalist aesthetic she was planning for the condos. Julian sat at the head of the table, looking like the powerful corporate partner his mother always wanted. "Evelyn, dear," Eleanor said, sipping her Pinot Noir, looking at my plain linen dress, "make sure you don't look too tired for the groundbreaking ceremony next month. The local press will be there. We want to project an image of effortless success." I smiled, took a sip of my water, and looked at Julian. "Actually, Eleanor, I won't be at the groundbreaking ceremony. I have a major project of my own starting that day." Julian frowned. "What project? The city budget is locked for the summer, Evie." "It's a private contract," I said smoothly, keeping my voice completely level. "A community arts pavilion and green space. I'm funding it myself." Clara chuckled softly, swirling her wine. "Funding it yourself? With a city architect's salary? That's cute, Evelyn." I didn't answer her. I just looked at my father-in-law, who was staring at me with a sudden, sharp look of suspicion. He was a businessman. He knew that tone. He knew the quiet confidence of someone who isn't bluffing. "Julian," his father muttered, leaning forward, "what is she talking about?" Before Julian could answer, my phone buzzed on the table. It was a notification from my attorney. The final legal paperwork for the detachment of assets had been processed. The trap was set, the foundation was pulled out, and all that was left was for gravity to do its job. The groundbreaking ceremony for Julian and Eleanor's waterfront development fell on a humid Tuesday in mid-June. The local business press was there, along with a dozen city officials standing on the gravel lot under a crisp white tent. Julian was at the podium, adjusting his microphone, while Clara stood off to the side holding a shiny, silver-plated ceremonial shovel. Just as Julian cleared his throat to speak, a sleek black town car pulled up to the edge of the lot. Two men in dark suits stepped out, carrying legal briefcases. They didn't look at the press or the shiny shovels. They walked directly up to the tent and handed a stack of certified documents to Julian's father and his lead project manager. The project manager's face drained of color within seconds. He whispered something to Julian's father, who immediately stormed up to the podium, grabbing Julian by the arm and pulling him away from the microphone. The documents were an immediate, legally binding cease and desist order, backed by an injunction from the city's Environmental and Zoning Board. What Julian and Eleanor's high-priced lawyers had completely overlooked in their rush to secure the land was a major municipal easement. The entire eastern boundary of their waterfront lot sat directly on a critical metropolitan stormwater overflow zone, a zone that I had officially surveyed, mapped, and secured a private development lease for using my grandfather Arthur's estate funds just 3 weeks prior. According to the city code, their luxury condos could not be built within 150 feet of my zone without causing severe flooding risks to the neighborhood. Because of the narrow shape of their lot, losing those 150 feet made their entire architectural blueprint structurally impossible. The loan was already drawn, the house was already locked as collateral, and now the project was dead in the water before the first shovel could touch the dirt. As the tent erupted into a panic of hushed phone calls and arguing lawyers, Julian's phone buzzed. It was a text from me. It contained a single address in downtown Boston and 4 words: "Your keys are here." When Julian, Eleanor, and Clara arrived at my studio office an hour later, they didn't find a crying housewife. They found a licensed professional sitting behind a clean mahogany desk, surrounded by massive, beautifully rendered blueprints of a public arts pavilion. Julian's face was twisted in absolute fury. "Evelyn, what the hell did you do? You knew about the easement? You let us sign the papers. My mother's firm is going to default and the bank is going to take our house." I stood up slowly, leaning my hands flat against the blueprints on my desk. "Correction, Julian," I said, my voice cutting through the room like a cold wind. "The bank is going to take your house. It was never mine. Your mother made sure of that." Eleanor stepped forward, her expensive silk scarf trembling. "You spiteful, ungrateful little girl. You ruined my family's venture over a petty grudge." "No, Eleanor," I replied, looking her dead in the eye. "I didn't ruin anything. I just stopped giving you my free labor. I spent a year drafting the infrastructure for that lot. When you handed it to Clara and told me I lacked ambition, I simply took my blueprints, my license, and my grandfather's millions, and I built something else." I picked up a heavy gold keychain from my desk, the keys to the Boston house, and dropped them onto the table. They hit the wood with a sharp, heavy clink. "I moved the last of my things into my new penthouse downtown this morning," I said calmly. "Julian, my attorney has already filed the divorce papers. The independent residence clause in my grandfather's will is satisfied. The money is mine, the pavilion is funded, and you have exactly 30 days to figure out where you're going to live." Clara looked like she was about to cry. Eleanor opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. The realization had finally hit them. The very system they tried to use to marginalize me, the legal ownership, the corporate arrogance, the financial exclusion, was the exact framework I used to lock them out. The estate settled by the end of the summer. Julian's project completely collapsed. The waterfront lot was auctioned off to pay the bank, and he and his mother had to downsize to a rented 2-bedroom apartment in the suburbs. Clara moved back to her parents' house, her interior design career over before it even started. 3 weeks ago, we held the grand opening for the Arthur Vance Community Pavilion. It is a gorgeous, open-air structure made of sustainable timber and clean concrete, featuring massive rain gardens that filter millions of gallons of city runoff every year. My younger brother, Leo, stood beside me in the center of the pavilion, The main gallery wall was covered in his hyper-detailed, stunning watercolors of the city's changing architecture. He had finally found a space that people wouldn't leave behind. Eleanor's old charcoal coat is still sitting in a donation bin somewhere in downtown Boston. I don't wear it. I wear my old denim jacket when I'm out on the job site watching the concrete pour. Here is what I know for certain. The quiet people are not waiting because they are helpless. They are waiting because they are analyzing the structure. And when the timing is right, they don't just knock your house down. They build something beautiful right over the ruins.